Hey, Mark, good morning. How are you doing?
Doing well, Alejandro. Good morning. How are you?
Good. I just wanted to go over some how to buy a house actually, because there's a lot of people out there that are asking, I want to buy a house. What do I do? Who do I go to? What does that look like?
Yeah, great question. I mean, 2025 is a very exciting time. A lot of people looking to buy a house this year. They've been sitting on the sidelines for a few years. So the first step to getting a home is picking the right lender. Most individual buyers start 95%, as a matter of fact, start with looking at Zillow leads and realtor leads, and they end up calling a realtor, which is exactly the wrong thing to do. The very first thing you need to do is you need to with a lender, and you need to pick the right lender. And the reason that is because that is the first step to what's called getting pre-approved.
So I want to get pre-approved. I've heard of this term before. What do you need from me to get pre-approved? What should I expect to have ready if I'm going to contact you or use I believe you have an app link that I can send to people and they fill it out. What should they have ready?
The pre-approval process is really assessing how much money we will lend you in order to help you purchase a price. And there's really essentially four things that we're going to assess to determine what it is that you can afford and what it is that we can lend you. And those four things are your 2 year work history, your gross income per month, your debt to income ratio, and your FICO score. Once we have all that information, then we can put together an idea of what it is that you can get pre-approved.
So I want to know then, I don't know what I can get pre-approved for, but I filled out your app and I told you that I make $130,000 a year, this and that. Do you just go off of that and send me a pre-approval, or do you need to dig deeper? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, so there's a little bit of a step in there. Exactly. So essentially what happens is you have a link to an application. So once you complete that application or once you start that application, I get an alert. I reach out and ask to do a one-on-one quick consultation so I better understand what it is that you're looking to achieve. What is your home ownership goal? And during that time, you will also then provide me with documentation to support what you and I talk about, but also what you put on the application. And that documentation is essentially just four things. It's your tax returns for the last 2 years. It's your W-2s for the last 2 years. It's your two most recent pay stubs, and it's your two most recent bank statements. Once I have all that information, I can verify through that documentation what it is you and I talked about and what it is that you put on the application. Once I know all that, I can come up with a number and I then shoot it back to the realtor and let them know what you are pre-approved for. And then what happens with the client after that? What do you usually do then?
As a professional real estate agent, I get a pre-approval. We are then ready to go search for homes. So I want to have a consultation with them while they're getting pre-approved and go over what their expectations are. What kind of information do they know already about real estate, if any at all? I want to know their mindset so I can help build an education system, strategy, and make sure that they're in the right mindset to buy a house, because it can get exhausting when you're looking from home to home to home. And there's so many options and people fall in love with so many homes. I want to get them set up with homes on a search collaboration, which is typically through the MLS. A lot of us agents do that. I like to go a step further and I always stay in touch with my network, which is very crucial. And from there, let's just say that we actually found a home. They fell in love with it. They got to have it. We submit an offer and it gets accepted. I then need to get this offer over to you, correct? What happens from there? What should they expect from you as the lender?
Yeah, you're exactly right. So once your offer is accepted, then you send me the purchase agreement. And what I do with that purchase agreement is I combine that with the list of documents that you've already provided me, the pay stubs, the W-2s, the bank statements, the tax returns. I take that information, I submit it to the underwriter. But in order for me to be able to submit it to the underwriter, I first have to send your client what's called a loan estimate. By law, I need to send that in order to move to the next step of submitting the documents to the underwriter. And the loan estimate is just that. It's an estimate of all the costs that are going to be associated with buying that house. You've provided me with a purchase agreement for a number, let's call it $250,000 with 20% down. So they're going to have a loan estimate of what their costs are going to be to buy that house. Once they review that loan estimate, sign it, and send it back to me, I then can do two things. Send it to the underwriter for review of documentation and place an order for an appraisal to have the appraiser go out and evaluate, is this house indeed worth what you're buying it for?
Okay.
Once the underwriter completes their review and assessment of all the documentation, we move from pre-approval to what's called approval with conditions. That may require a couple more documents that we need to provide. We may need to provide a divorce decree, perhaps. We need to provide homeowners insurance. We may need to provide a more recent pay stub. We may be required to provide a last pay stub from the previous year that matches with the W-2. So there's a number of different documents that may be required from the underwriter to get us to the next step, which is called clear to close. And once we have cleared to close, I believe then there's a next step that you guys go through once you have that final clear to close.
Yeah, so the clear to close pretty much means we can get to the closing table. Prior to that, we like to do a final walkthrough. It's a part of the offer to purchase, so it gives the buyer the right to walk through the house to do a final inspection to make sure that the house is in the same or better condition than when we put the offer in. And if everything checks out, we get to move to the closing table. So I got a couple questions for you actually, real quick. One, what happens when things get sent to the underwriter? Let's define who is the underwriter exactly. Is that the final decision maker? Who are they?
Yeah, so the underwriter works for the lender, and the underwriter is the most important person in this entire process. They are assessing you as a potential risk to lend money to. And it goes back to what I talked about earlier, which are the four steps. What is your 2-year work history? What is your gross income? What is your debt to income ratio? And what is your FICO score, your credit score? Once they've assessed that and then determined that you are a low risk, they then will give you that approval with conditions. Um, the other thing that they're thinking about, though, is they're following guidelines that are created by the two big organizations that control the mortgage industry, which are Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. So Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac have guidelines that all lenders follow when it comes to individual buyers. And each lender, for example, that underwriter who works for a particular lender may have additional guidelines that they follow based upon the lender guidelines. So there's the Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac guidelines, and there might be some lender guidelines. So that underwriter is going to determine, do we meet all the guidelines? Does this buyer meet all the guidelines? And is this someone that we want to lend money to?
So should I feel bad if I can't get approved because I'm maybe a high risk?
No one wants to lend money to someone that is a risk, but on the flip side, it's more of a, okay, there are potentially things that we can do in a very short interim to get you where that risk is reduced and you actually get the acceptance or with the conditions. For example, maybe your homeowner's insurance is just a little bit too much, so your debt to income ratio is too high. And so the underwriter is really essentially there to protect you, the consumer, and protect the process that you actually are able to afford to be able to buy this house. And there's all sorts of things that we can do if they come back with not approving you, and it may be just a matter of increasing your income slightly, reducing your debt slightly. There's all sorts of things that we can do. So don't feel like once if they do come back without accepting you that we can't do something to make that. There's always a way to help you buy that house.
So overall, a buyer can expect to have some strategies to work on with you. you would provide some guidance along the lines if they're close. They're like, I'm like, it's so close. This is ridiculous. Why can't I just get pre-approved? And yeah, so you would work on that with them, correct?
Absolutely. So the idea is to bring as much certainty to the process as possible. And the best way to bring certainty to you being able to buy a home, even after you've got an offer accepted, is to make sure that we've done all the work up front, got all the documentations reviewed and understand exactly what it is your goals are, understand what your credit score is, understand what your debt to income ratio is, all those factors. If we have all that information up front, submitting all that information to the underwriter should be smooth and just seamless, and we should be able to move from that pre-approval process to the approved with conditions. And those conditions are usually very minor conditions: homeowners insurance, divorce decree, very minor documentation that we need to clear those conditions.
Got it. Mark, this is great. Thank you so much. This is great information. Glad that we have the opportunity to do this and provide this information to our clients and consumers out here and people who have questions. If they wanted to get in touch with you, who should they contact exactly? How do they get in touch with you?
Yeah, so down below, you'll see my one-on-one link consultation. That's a great way to start. You also see my email down there, but you can call, email, or sign up to have a one-on-one consultation.
Awesome.